Hello, welcome. My name is Bryan Hains. This is
Kristina Hains.
We are from the Department of Community and Leadership Development at the University of Kentucky. And we're on the Community Innovation Lab there. And so we're really excited that you actually showed up at 4 in the afternoon in order to have a professional development. Hopefully we'll make this entertaining as well as educational at the same time. We're going to be hitting on some topics that are going to hopefully be real relevant to your professional lives, but navigated in a way that is often overlooked. So we've tried a little technology here. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and scan that QR code. That'll help guide you through the whole presentation. And you want to talk about improv? The projector isn't working, so I'm glad that we thought ahead. This is called preflection, and we did it pretty well this time. So, as we start to look at this, again, this is improv as a methodology for us to become better prepared to engage with our professional lives. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right off the top that I am way more comfortable with this than my colleague is. She, why don't you speak for yourself?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's value in this. And I actually do think, we actually were having a meeting with some of our extension agents that are in a leadership program that we're running the other day. And they were talking about this idea that they run into a lot of situations that kind of throw them off, that they really haven't had before, and they have to think on their feet, and sometimes it doesn't end up very well. And so we talked about this idea of improv, and it's basically kind of like practicing, being proactive as opposed to reactive about situations that could be uncomfortable or situations that are unusual. And they're like, wow, that's a great idea. When can we go to this training, or when can we do this type aspect? So that's kind of where we're at. I will be absolutely honest. I do case studies in my leadership classes all the time. I love them. Role plays freaks me out a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, I think there's ways that you can do that are very useful and not scary. So that's kind of where we're at today.
I have a strong background in teaching and learning, and I've used this for undergraduate and graduate students for a very long time. But I've also used it in international settings that we've used for community development workers across the globe. And it was the first time they've ever had a structured opportunity to engage like that. And so it's nice to hear an almost retired veteran professor say that this is the first time she's actually gone through something like this, and truly wish that she'd gone through it earlier in her career so that she could have implemented it as a strategy. So that's kind of what we're going to go after today. Many of you are already working in the field or have experience in the field or planning on professional aspects of the field. There's going to be points in time where you're going to have a cultural faux pas. There's going to be times when you have an emotional connection to some of the interactions that you're going to have. There's going to be times when there are awkward situations. And at those points in times, how you react really depends on your professional behaviors at that time. You will be judged on your professional behaviors during those components. So why not go ahead and practice those ahead of time, rather than, as Chris was saying, be reactionary during the time that it happens. If this were to happen in your career, it has huge, huge implications compared to if you're practicing it within the safety of friends, as you see here. Does that make sense so far? Questions?
A lot of times also when you end up doing it, if you are working in a community and you have a faux pas like Dr. Hains was talking about, trust is really hard to build back. And relationships that you've developed are really hard to kind of redo and continue on sometimes. I mean, obviously, empathy and things along that go a long way, but it's no different than practicing piano, guys, or if there's something else in your life that you practice, if you practice a sport or things, the more that you're going to do this, then the more that you will be able to think on your feet and interact in an appropriate way. So, in a purposeful way, if you will.
So what I'd like you to do is, if you scan your card there, it'll take you to the whole presentation. I ask that you please don't go ahead. Many of you are wanting to see what the end of the story is. Chill out on that for just a minute. Go ahead and relax and go through it as we're moving through. The second page of this is a few questions. Okay, and those questions
We're going to have to change them.
Huh?
We're going to have to shift.
Why?
Because those are the ones for the group.
No, we're good. All right. So think of a time when you had an emotional connection to something in your profession. All right? Or if you don't have a time when you had it in a profession, think about it in your personal life. With a significant other, with a family member, with a sister or a sibling, with a good friend of yours. What was the situation that caused an emotion for you, a strong emotion for yourself? So think about the stimulus, that's the point of contact, right? That's the point that you remember. Think about the stimulus, the emotion that was evoked, and then think about how you behaved. If you wouldn't mind writing those 3 down on your sheet of paper, that
You
would be
should have a notepad in front of you.
as you're going, if you're not thinking about this, there was a time, a good friend of ours, she was trying to engage Latin audiences in Lexington, and she was working for the mayor's office. So she goes to this big Latin celebration, which in our case is in a place called Cardinal Valley. And she was at the hub of Latin audiences is at the library there. So she had never had tamale. She's a Southern girl and had never had a tamale in her life, but she wanted to be respectful. So as she's eating this tamale, she's eating the whole thing, corn husk and all, right? So as she's eating this, it's not very dietary for her, right? It probably tastes pretty terrible from that perspective. And so there was an abuelita or a grandmother that came over and said that, you need to open that up, sweetheart, and eat the material, the food in between that. That social faux pas caused opportunity for laughter, but extremely embarrassing for the individual working in the community. And so there was an emotional reaction, right? Now it was handled well, but it could have gone a completely different direction, depending on what the scenario was and how people interpreted that. So please write down your specific examples here. Pet peeves, I mean the things that grate on
Drive
you.
you crazy.
Like people who go slow in the fast lane.
Or people that pull through when the light's turning red and stop in the intersection because they didn't get thrown away.
People who talk all the way through your class if you're an introvert.
Or they're on their phone all the way through your class, but your class isn't legit.
People who have zero passion. Apathy is one of my pet peeves.
All right. Last year I was working for extensionists with farmers, and we have a field visit with a trainer because he was from the U.S. and he went to Ecuador to teach farmers, and we went to a really poor part of Ecuador, and something was really impact for me to see those farmers in that situation because they didn't have house. I don't know how they make it, but they were living in a place that I don't consider a house. And that was the first question, the situation, that impact. The second part was, I feel really sad, the sadness to see them, and I didn't know how to express it. I needed to be really professional because I was a visit for them, and I just was thinking about why they are in that situation, when other farmers have other situations, and how I react. I feel compassion and I value what I have, because there are many people that live in those kind of situations, vulnerable situations, and we are good. We are in an excellent situation with health. Also, one of the farmers were sick, so in the poorness situation and also sick. So that's a really hard situation that until now I still remember.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Right? So your emotions at that point in time, you're trying to move forward and work with this audience, but deep inside you, you're just really saddened by the certain circumstances that are happening there. So how do you control those emotions? Because otherwise it looks like I'm really sad for you, which can be coming off as quite egotistical, even though you're humble in the way that you're expressing those emotions. They may be perceived as egotistical. Oh, your life is better, so you feel bad for me. I don't need your empathy or sympathy kind of thing.
Yeah, and how do you maintain the respect that you're trying, obviously you're there on a professional situation and you're trying to show respect, but at the same time, either determine if they have other needs or, other things like that, moving ahead, as well as having already the sadness that you're, trying to deal with in that vein at the same time.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, bro.
Anybody else?
I work with 5 rural communities in Georgia, so not international, but Georgia the state, not the country. And there's one community member, we have community coalitions that we work with there, and one community member had looked up what our grant funds were, like how much we were awarded for the time, and then decided that their community should get 1/5 of that. So while someone else was hosting the meeting, he came over to talk to me about like, well, we should be receiving, $1.2 million. And I'm like, anyway. But he was asking a lot of questions, had kind of a raised voice and a very dominant stance while he was talking to me. And that made me nervous and a little flustered and embarrassed that I was having those reactions. And it caused me, very similar to right now, to speak quickly, be a little bit nervous while I'm chattering. I didn't have a great response, and my supervisor did step in to fix that situation, but I would love some practice on handling it better myself.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. That's perfect. Absolutely. You got one as well?
We're partially kind of known as personal things from my time when I served with the Peace Corps, a bit more personal than professional. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, Peace Corps Senegal. I did it from 2018 to 2020, and I stayed with a host family for the entire time after I swore and had training. At the time in the mid-2019, I had to return home because my grandmother passed away. And I was explaining this to my host family that, okay, I have to go home for a while. And one of them asked me if I was coming back. And I said, yes, I'll be back in 2 weeks. And he said, all right, so you're going to America and then you're coming home. And that really made me happy. I've only been there since 6 or 7 months at the time, maybe a little longer. And it made me happy that we had already formed a connection and they considered me a part of the family when they could have just considered me a tenant because they were being paid by Peace Corps, but that they still accepted me into their family.
Absolutely.
That's a
That's
great
a great
positive
example.
example.
I was going to say, yeah. Really good, different examples, the sadness aspect, the nervous and kind of, the maybe not knowing how to push ahead in a situation, and then ultimately a positive one, although possibly also, a little bit emotional,
So these are why we need this opportunity, right? So you're really starting to express, and all of you have your individual ones, but those who shared, and I think others have a similar component here. There are times in your professional career where you're just not on your game, and there's going to be a situation where you're going to come into these interactions, and why not practice that? It's like basketball. I've got 2 left feet. Well, eventually I'm going to have 1 left foot, 1 right foot, but they still might not be perfect, but at least I can dribble the ball. It's all of this is practice. And in social sciences, we never get that opportunity. We're so caught up in content, right? And skill-based that we forget that what we call soft skills are actually what gets us to be the best professionals that we can be, and we put all that to the side. So therefore, that's where we're headed here. But
I just want to throw one last thing in there. Plus, emotions tend to, when they just pop up in different situations, they tend to basically make your brain mush, and all of your logic, in extreme cases, I would argue. Logic goes out the window, and so the happiness or the sadness or the anxiety, all that stuff makes it a little bit harder to do whatever you had kind of planned out logically in that interaction.
Yep.
And so the more that you practice that, it's not like are going to ever be able to just say, oh, I can control all my emotions all the time. But I mean, again, like he was saying, you get better at basketball, you can get better at thinking on your feet and again, engaging purposefully.
if you listen to hip hop music, Eminem talks about his hands are sweaty, mom's spaghetti kind of thing. Everybody who gets up in front of anybody, I've been doing this for over 20 years, if you don't have nerves, you're not on your game, is what I always say. And so there's always that opportunity where you get that little bit of nervous energy right before you go rock and roll. And that's good, right? It's the eustress that comes through, but it still can cause you to speak like an auctioneer for the first 2 minutes of your game before you're into the situation. So let's go ahead and set some ground rules, right? So this whole thing is grounded, if you move on to the next slide or the next page there, on the suspension of disbelief. It means that if I see this apple right here, it has now just become a baseball. And if I throw it around, we can articulate that that's an apple. Logically, we know that's an apple. But in our minds, we're going to be utilizing it as a baseball because now we're role-playing, or we're going to hypothetically put ourselves into a situation where that is no longer an apple, it's a baseball. Okay, so the scenarios here are a suspension of disbelief. We're sitting in a conference, but we're going to turn this into a social situation that is a professional situation that you could potentially be in. And we're going to act that out, okay, through improv. The second component are the 5 stages.
So Improv, and again, I feel like that there's kind of different personalities, and there's some people, as you mentioned earlier, that are maybe a little bit more embracing of different types of things that you can do in the classroom, in an organization, in a setting. In this case, they're calling it play. If you look at the 5 skills of improvisation, they're calling it this idea that it's almost like you're engaging in play, but not really. Again, it's different than we're going to sit down and take notes, we're going to sit down to a lecture, we're going to sit down to these very directive types of things, which I'll be honest, in my case, if you told me, hey, let's go, play in class, or let's go role play, I would be like, yep, okay, and I'm out the back door. Because my personality, I'm like, I can handle taking notes, I can handle all this other stuff. That makes me uncomfortable.
How many of you are her?
So I consider myself a proud box checker, and I do all that good stuff, but it makes me uncomfortable. So ultimately, and again, part of what we're doing today is you guys are participating, but in the back of your mind, I want you to think about, okay, so if I have a group that I work with and wanted to kind of do something similar with my group, kind of that train the trainer mentality, that how would you set it up if you were trying to have your committee do something like this, or a group, or an organization, or if you were doing, kind of your own training, okay? And so there's just some basic, you have ground rules when you bring community members together. There's ground rules for this. And one of those is, and you can see them in front of you on your screens, be ready to play, just be engaged. It doesn't mean that you have to do all the speaking. It doesn't mean we're going to have you do cartwheels or anything crazy. Kim Dooley was in here earlier and said that I mentioned improv, and she said, well, I can do voices. We're not going to have you do voices, anything crazy.
But that'd be cool, though.
It would be really cool. Yeah, that's a talent. So be engaged. Okay, the second one is let yourself fail. As a leadership educator, I can guarantee you we do not have enough spaces in life where we can make a mistake, learn from that, and move ahead. We say we do, in this space you can, so that's good. There's not necessarily a right or wrong, although we will come back and say, hey, let's look at this interaction and how maybe it could have gone better, et cetera, okay? Always be listening. I think that speaks for itself. You probably should listen quite a bit much more than you speak. I know I should be listening a lot more than I speak. Say yes, again, this idea of just engaging this, hey, literally we're going to do this improv a max of 10 minutes. So it's not like, it's not a big deal. You will live through this, so it'll be good. And finally, just relax and have fun. Again, it's not going to be intense. Don't overthink it, and just kind of, engage. We're going to give you guys, when we end up getting to improv, we're going to give you guys some prompts. And so just kind of roll with it. And then obviously when we get done, we'll come back and we'll debrief. So,
Are there any questions about some of the rules here? Scan that sucker. Good. All right, so the scenario then, right? Is that where we're at?
we are at the scenario.
So the scenario is actually a real scenario. We work with urban extension agents in Kentucky. This is specific to Louisville, but we've transitioned it to anywhere that you can imagine. There are a lot of abandoned lots in this urban sector. And those urban lots are currently owned by the city, but they're just sitting there being neglected. There's also a huge immigrant population moving into the area based on global events. And as a result of that, there's opportunity here. So as a community leader, an extension professional, some of you will be playing the role of the extension professionals to navigate this meeting. The rest of you will be playing individuals representative of the community, okay? So the dynamics here are set so that there's an opportunity for these to be utilized by immigrant community members. But there are also landowners and other people and constituents in the situation to navigate that situation. Is that fair? Everybody clear on the context? Open lots in urban sectors that are currently neglected, owned by the city, but then the city wants those to be utilized in a democratic way to be utilized by these new immigrant populations that are coming into the system, into the city. Got it?
Utilized for what?
Well, you haven't decided that part yet.
Okay.
Welcome to Improv.
And actually, if you look on here, you could see there's a lot of different ideas for green space, for community gardens, for fruit and nut trees in order to have kind of an entrepreneurial venture as far as making money. So a lot of different things.
You have the individuals that you remember.
I do.
Go ahead, Raymond.
Okay. Larry, please.
I said too close.
I know, because I'm going back here. I'm sorry, I didn't hit you. Yeah, Hannah, I want you to come up front.
Okay, I will do that.
See, she didn't sit anywhere close to the front.
Do I need my to reference?
No, I think for right now, he'll just come up and have a seat.
Does it matter where we sit?
No? No.
And what was your name?
Area?
I
Eric?
want to sit in the hot seat.
Everybody else come outside with me. Let's go.
Okay.
They're gonna apply.
We're in real trouble.
Well, looks like we have leadership materials, so.
We're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a shorts campaign on phones when I get back.
Oh, fun. Hopefully they'll get to sleep before.
Very nice. We get back at like 8 p.m. Grabbing fast food, go to bed.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting dynamic that you must. Okay.
You
got the email. By improv,
You guys
is you
are,
represent different
again,
aspects
as
of
you mentioned,
sex. Okay.
you guys are running again, you heard the case today, that you guys are the,
Right, not my
either
backyard.
the leadership
I don't
or
want
the
to know
extension
that person,
faculty
right? That person
that
needs to be
are
associated.
all meeting together to decide
That
what
needs
to
to
do
be
with these
immigrant
different lots, how to go about it, how to
That says,
engage,
no, this is a perfect opportunity.
the immigrant population.
That I used to pay
No.
for some of the conference.
Conversations.
Start talking amongst yourselves.
Feel like you're in a community meeting.
And I think I might have talked to you about that wire transfer, but anyway,
A little bit about it.
Situations with both of them. Does that make sense?
We are trying to.
And it's okay, just remember,
reach a
whatever
consensus
said is
about what to
personal.
use the lots
This
for.
is
About, yeah, what to use the lots
improv, and
for.
it's supposed to be.
Maybe there's a procedure involved, maybe
They
there's,
have to
you
deal
know,
with
as
it.
far as
You don't.
who to offer them to, you know,
But
like,
if I come at you, I'll.
you're kind of the decision maker. if you will.
So are they going to come in without views on how they want to
I
do
totally
it?
disagree.
That's an
I don't
excellent
disagree
question.
with you personally.
I feel like you're going to come in with a lot of ideas that are opposite of whatever you want to say.
What are we doing?
Yeah,
So
but
think
there are
about
plans for
what
the lots.
person that you are like, oh, that just really
There's
great.
an,
So be that
there's an
person.
infrastructure bill coming up, so I
Okay,
think
so
we could
talk amongst
probably,
yourselves and figure out what roles do you
find some
want
funding
in
through
this
that
scenario.
in our state. Maybe
Ready?
for low-income housing.
Either mountains or places and.
Just choosing your individual role and explain it to everybody. That's right. So,
Who would you
let's see,
offer
I'll go
the
ahead and
lots
be the
to? Like how
honorary,
either the process
typical
that
white
we go
bastard.
through,
This is
or,
Mona the land, right? And there, and I said, I'll be the not my.
you know, in order to augment their salary, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Are you open?
So, yeah, they, now, sometimes they're next to
We're absolutely opposed to
low-income
it.
housing,
Okay, I'll be the
because they're
opposite.
having grades and stuff.
When I was thinking like the community gardens and stuff.
Oh, yeah,
Good. So
absolutely.
it's a benefit, it's a huge idea. Community advocates, right? You're like, go. What's the assignment again? I spent 75 hours doing it. So I say, I have no idea what I'm doing. What? Perfect. All right, are you ready? After everybody, let's go. Have a seat. Welcome to the town meeting.
Thank you.
We shouldn't have.
You're like, yep, we're done here.
And we're done.
We adjourn it right now?
Okay, welcome to the community meeting, right?
Yes. Of course.
It's at the office facility.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our meeting today. We're very happy we have so many representatives from the community here to decide what to do with the lots that we have available. Yes.
How much control do you really have over this decision-making process? Because we need to have our voice heard, and I'm fired up. I'm ready to have a conversation tonight. So I just want to know, are you guys going to try to mute us, or what's your plan here?
No, this is pretty much a brainstorming session. We have representatives from city planning, extension, and another very important group here. So yeah, we just would like to hear what y'all would like. If y'all have any ideas for the lots, and maybe we can work together to come up with a plan. So, would anyone like to start? You seem pretty fired up. Would you like to go?
Oh, no, I'm ready to hear everybody else's. I will give in my time, I promise that.
Well, I have a general idea. I think that the city should use this lot, but not be in a hurry to use this lot since it's city-owned, and I know that we have this immigrant population, and I really think we need to evaluate all the options that we have before we decide to do this, because it could have further implications that we do not see.
That's a really good point. Oh, yes.
I think that we should use this lot to build low-income housing because there are a lot of immigrants that are coming into the city and they need a place that's affordable for them since they don't earn financial advisors.
Sure, hold on, let me respond to these two.
Yeah, but see, I don't want my stuff, like, listen here, okay? If we start going with the low-income housing and all that stuff, then the equity in my house is gonna go down, and I don't need those people to be around my house.
And also too, if you put in higher income housing, that means that the general wealth and population, wealth in the city could increase as opposed to the low wealth housing.
Sure, well, I think first of all, we can start probably by surveying the lots to see if the housing is even an option or not. So that's what we were thinking we needed to start with. Hopefully we'll have that results by the time we reconvene for our next meeting. But those are great ideas, and they're definitely going on our list of things to consider. Yes, you.
Well, the lots have been empty for quite a while. I mean, what is it that's just automatically spurred this discussion that we need to come up with an idea right now? Because usually, I mean, a program is going to, let's face it, is it going to be successful? I feel like we're going to just bowl right into it, and I'm afraid that it's just going to be haphazard and we're not going to get done exactly what needs to be done.
More people making decisions for us, huh?
That's a fair concern. Let me answer your question by saying, we've all heard about the recent infrastructure bill coming through Congress, so we're hoping that together as this planning group, we can come up with something and develop a proposal to utilize those funds with this lot that we have conveniently here. Yes, you had a question?
No, I have a question. I agree that it's a great idea that immigrant people can come to our community. That will help us a lot to be more diversity, and that will help to the community as well. We can explore this potential people that are coming that will support us, and I'm agree of that. You don't have to ask others. I mean, we can discuss here, and I think that we are agreed that. What do you think?
Only if they're tax-paying citizens. If they're not illegal, we don't need any green cards here, man. That's what I'm talking about, right?
We don't need to discriminate those people because they are also the people that have values, and they will come here because they need to work, and they are maybe they have children. They will go to schools. I totally agree that.
I pay for it. That's the problem, right?
And it could have implications upon how the city decides to vote on certain laws and future laws.
Of course. So what I'm hearing,
You've spoken quite a bit. I'd like to hear the other two perspectives here.
So what are we really doing here? Are you like going to pay us something for just wasting our time?
No, sir, we're here because we want the opinions of the community on ways that we can properly utilize these lots. As of right now, they're sitting there and empty, running ragged, no one's using them, full of trash, wild teenagers. I think these should be used. And on the topic of low-income housing, potentially lowering the equity of your home, I have a question for you, sir. What could lower the equity of your home more, low-income housing or homeless people on the streets?
Oh yeah, but see, we shove the homeless people up, right? We put them in one lot, we just try and push them, like, I go out there, I say, you gotta move, right? I can't have this. And so I actually try, we have a lot of friends of mine that actually go out. Now, I'll feed them and all, but they gotta go sleep somewhere else. I don't mind feeding them, but I'll push them off somewhere else.
Inclusion and diversity is something we are pushing forward. So can you tell me why and your reason for trying to make sure that this diverse group of people don't get into this community?
Have you not looked around? This is the urban sector. There's already diversity all around us. There's old people and young people, men and women. That's diverse as all get out.
Well, we're talking about immigrants and low income. I mean, what are the numbers here that we're even dealing with as far as, these are either two separate populations or they are people seeing them as one and the same? I feel like we're not defining our audiences very well.
I think it's most likely that they'd be one and the same. They're coming from areas where they may not have had very much to begin with, and due to circumstances out of their control in their countries, they're coming here with even less than whatever they had.
But how is that our problem? I mean, what are we doing here? We're just wasting time. Could be somewhere else doing something else. Why do we have to waste time?
Well, wasting time to want to help people in need. That's the American way.
Let me expand on that a bit too. we are accepting these individuals from these other countries that are in war-torn areas to give them a better life. And I think that is the American way in a lot of ways. And if you look at it, we are all immigrants. There's nobody native to this country, except the Native Americans who were here before we came. So we have ancestors, we have, family members that came over with different circumstances, but we're all here. And these people, are truly people, and they have lives that have been torn. And I don't think any of us probably can really picture what it means to like what happened in Afghanistan, that, in the middle of the night, people left with just the clothes on their back, and they've left family, left friends, they've left their country, and we're giving them an opportunity to start over. And this is one of the ways that we can do it, is to be able to say, okay, the city has these lots, they've had them for a long time, and now they've realized that this is a wonderful opportunity to provide a way for folks that come into this country to be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, so to speak. We just have to give them a chance.
Are you a Biden supporter by any means? You sure sound like that liberal agenda. That's all I
If you look at my pet peeves, that was the number one.
So would this not have budget implications on the city? If you develop housing, you'll have to grade, you'll have to find electricians, plumbers, and then the contractors themselves have to pay for all the stuff, especially with the lumber prices right now that's really, really high. Do you not think that it would be better just to hold back for a minute, keep it under the city confines, and wait for the prices to go down before we really even choose to make a decision?
Sure, that's a fair point. And I'll start by saying, obviously we haven't decided on what we're doing with the lot yet. So it could be a low-cost project, it could be a high-cost project. But like I stated earlier, we're hoping to lean on that infrastructure bill slightly and potentially even create jobs in our community with the project we're going to be doing.
The land use does not necessarily have to be for, community projects. For living space. We could actually turn this into a community garden, for example. But give people a little plot of land they could grow their own vegetables that they could then benefit the community with. So it's not all or none.
Larry took it to a whole nother level there. He's like, all right, let's keep going. Hi. Let's give them a round of applause. So, how do you feel?
I felt like I was in work again.
Yeah, wonderful.
But on the spot, you did it for everybody though, wonderful.
Larry, how do you feel?
I had to feel it out to start with, to
Sure.
kind of see where the conversation was going. But it appeared like you had coached the group to be a belligerent audience.
Yes.
And we were trying to field the questions and process those at the same time, to be able to give an answer.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, but we're called upon to do that constantly.
We are. Yeah.
And that's why. So, by the way, just to be clear, none of that is for real, right? We have already explained. Yeah. I love it. What the hell are we doing? And, yes,
Can I
please.
share something?
Yeah.
So active listening, when I saw it, it actually resonated because I'm teaching a class and I actually have the students to get interview someone that they have a controversial view on something, and for them to practice to listen without trying to put their emotions into it or trying to argue with them, and then write like a short debrief and actually share with me in class. So because I said listening is something that so many of us are not gifted with. We
Right.
always want to be engaged in those conversations, but sometimes listening is a very strong component that we have to learn, because during the process we can change a lot of things.
Absolutely.
And otherwise, we're being reactive, right, ahead of time, and not paying attention and truly being authentic in our experience. And that's a wonderful, wonderful.
People listen to argue, not listen to.
Oh, yeah. They
Absolutely.
want to bulldoze their point, right? And it doesn't ever work out that way. Well, thank you all for
Yeah,
participating in that. But as we were navigating that, I could see there were emotions like, maybe we shouldn't even talk right now, right? And I gotta digest this a little bit more. Or I'm at work, so my nerves are up again. Or what's this white boy talking about over here, right? I got the whole gamut, and that's good because that should have been normal reactions. Unfortunately, we never, and I loved it that we were laughing in the middle because that's how this should work. You should be able to take that stuff on and laugh in the middle of this stuff without breaking character, but then continue on because and you obviously felt this was a safe environment to do that. Whereas in a professional world, it's not so safe, right? You're gonna find a Bryan Hains Henry cuss over in that situation that's not going to be playful about it. They're gonna be very, very real about that. I've ran into that particular person and I've asked my colleagues here to embody people that they've known or that they've been frustrated with. So this is a biological mechanism that happens. Okay, so if you go to your next slide, your next piece of paper, we've been working on this conceptual framework I've been working on it for about 15 years. When a stimulus comes in, you have your own cultural norms, values, and beliefs, okay? And so that's called stimulus appraisal theory. As you're getting the stimulus, right, so Larry was telling him, you know, he had to feel it out first. Well, those stimulus were coming at all three of these folks fast. And then they were coming at each other because we were spitballing off each other, right? We were working off of each other.
The emotional behavior models.
Yeah, it's the emotional behavior model should be the next one. So what happens is, as the stimuli comes in, your brain goes either, yes, this is, I'm in total agreement with this is great. Okay, just like my host family called me family. That's huge. So these emotions go override. She's feeling warm and fuzzy about this situation, and so she's feeling at the top of her game. On the other hand, it goes the opposite direction. And as the intensity of the emotion is coming through, we start to have biologically, you can't control it, it happens. Biologically, your brain shuts down. It's called the triune brain theory. Downshifting is what it's called. Okay? And as that happens, you actually lose mechanisms to reach your prefrontal cortex. So if you've ever been in a situation where you can articulate things like an academic, right? And use those big $25 words, and then go into a nervous situation and only be able to say, hi, my name is Bryan. That's what's happening there. Your nerves have overridden your head, and as a result of that, you're not going to be able to articulate yourself as well as you could in other circumstances. Same thing happens in these professional settings. The only way to navigate that, and you can even get into a fight or flight response. Listen here, dumbass, right? That is a fight response. Completely shutting down, just being like, I don't want to talk to them, and then leaving the situation would be a flight response. On the other
I
hand,
actually made that comment to our crew before y'all came in. I said, we're right by the door. This gets out of hand, we're out here.
Mr. Public Official, you're going to run into this stuff. I don't know any public official or public figure that doesn't get, and especially now it's on social media, that doesn't get bullied at some point or doesn't get negative news at some point, okay? In these live situations, it gets a little bit messier because you have to deal with it muy pronto, like real life happening. The only way to do that is to start practicing. So even if it's something that just makes you feel, not like fight or flight, but even if it makes you just feel nauseous or you have a little bit of anxiety, you still have diminished cognition. But even if it makes you super happy, you can, oh, we got engaged. I'm overwhelmed with emotion. You still can't speak because you're overwhelmed with emotion. Your emotions overrule your cognition every time.
Conflict, this happens a lot with conflict. If you work with groups and suddenly you end up in a situation where, you know, either people are yelling at each other, they start to get uncomfortable, like a conflict situation. In a lot of cases, it escalates very quickly, or people might shut down, or might leave, or do all those things. You know, a lot of people don't know how to deal with conflict when it's right in front of you. That's a great example of how that could be impacted by all the emotions. And a lot of people don't get taught how to deal with the conflict. You know, that's why you have a lot of the head-to-head combat and all those other things.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times now, I'm seeing this especially in students, is that it's the anticipation of a conflict that shuts them down.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
even
so-
before that.
Right,
Yeah.
so that, and which to me becomes another challenging sort of environment to deal with, because you're like, I need you to start, I know it's gonna be hard, but let's do this. And I think the anticipation of like, I don't even want to even step into that.
Even if it wouldn't be as bad as the perception was. A lot of times it's not.
I will say, have not thought about the framework of doing this before with just like my everyday work situations, but my original master's degree is in emergency management, and we do trainings like this, you know, full-scale exercises or smaller exercises, and I think it's such a smart way. We were joking that it kind of felt like we were getting ready for a game of D&D, and I think even if I can frame public speaking or public meetings or leading a meeting in a way where I'm like ready to play the game instead of like, oh God, like I think that could
I mean, that's a great point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in going through this, right, you've gone through the experience, you could identify the emotional triggers for you. You can now reflect on how you behaved, and you can reflect on how would you have handled me or others in a different way, retrospectively. But what happens when it's not retrospective? So if you go to the tools of the trade, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
But at the very end there's tools of the trade that have kind of given you some ideas about this.
Tools for extension professionals.
Tools for extension professionals. Athletics uses this all the time. They vision where they're going to go and what they're going to accomplish, and that psychological premonition, that preflection, is very, 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 very successful. Your most elite athletes use this daily. Why aren't we utilizing it as social scientists and social engagement and change agents, right? Why aren't we reflecting about this, about how can I turn that situation that's going to be tense into a positive mechanism? That way it takes the heat out of it right out the gate. If I know someone's going to be belligerent and talking to me, there are ways to use sticky notes. Everybody has a voice, and you just shut me up. There are ways to preflect on how to manage those belligerent mindsets or just very controversial situations so that you minimize the dynamic, the tension that can happen in that. That preflection will help you do that. Then,
I was just going to say a group example, again, going back to conflict, okay? Some of you may have heard about storming, norming, forming, Tuckman and Jensen, group dynamic, theory of group dynamics. But anyway, if you know that you're pulling together a group, set them up for success and make them kind of actually meet each other and take a little extra time on the front end, so then ultimately, and realize they probably are going to come to a conflict point, and give them ways like that. You know, the sticky notes is a way to actually minimize the conflict within, you know, by giving everybody a voice. Maybe you make sure that everybody has a specific role, and I mean, there's ways to set things up so that you can, if not avoid conflict altogether, minimize it to a point where it's functional and you can move past it, basically.
Larry was trying that mechanism if you watched him play in this situation, because he was saying everybody's an immigrant. He was trying to pull together a commonality amongst all participants that were in here, saying that there's a commonality that all of our ancestors have come into the situation, and this is how we've tried to navigate that. Okay, well, I was just trying to find a common era that would diminish a lot of the tension that was in the room. These are factors and facilitating methods that you can use, right? So that preflection. While it's happening, though, you have to be with it, right? And you have to be metacognitive about it. I already know that you're pushing my triggers, because I already know if I'm engaging here, I'm stepping away from you, and my non-verbal cues are already causing conflict between us. Now I know I've got to step towards you. Even though I don't want to, and everything's telling me to run out the door, I'm sitting here going, hey, okay, I got to engage you because you're just as viable and valuable of your opinion as everybody else. It just may be more vocal or it may be anti-me. I still have to engage. You have to be with it. Afterwards, go have a drink, go do coffee, whatever it takes for you to relax, go jump in the bathtub, whatever the heck, but go relax and then reflect. But give yourself 24 hours for that to settle in, reflect, and you can continually make yourself a better professional as you navigate these situations. But the art of improv and doing it within a safe environment like this helps you already navigate those situations, watching others, right? By doing it by observation, seeing how that you handled that. Maybe that's a new technique that I could use. Doing it in professional settings like this for in-service and pre-services is a really solid mechanism, even though it makes you feel uncomfortable, to go ahead and work through these prior to it ever happening in your professional lives.
Absolutely.
All in there. And you have all of those notes for you to take a look at, happy to discuss further, but hopefully you can take that with you and it'll help you out in your professions. Thank you all, you did rock star.